critics of some, but not all, of Chinese Asiatic theaters. Thanks you very much. Sorry.
Thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning, our guest speakers are coming from Japan and China, the most distant countries of Far East. Both China and Japan, they are physically and geographically are quite distant, but both countries are culturally and, if I may say, emotionally very close to Turkey. We have many things common between Japanese and Chinese cultures. Our guest speakers kind of invited our invitation and accepted the invitation and came to Turkey from Far East to Far West. I know how tiresome it is to fly from Beijing or from Tokyo. It's a non-stop flight, 13 or 14 hours, and 6 to 7 hours time difference, jet lag. Despite these difficulties, we appreciate their lectures. Thank you again. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you. Thank you for listening our guest speakers' lectures. I think this is the end of the opening session of the symposium. Yes.
12:20 geçe okulumuzun yemekhanesinde öğle yemeği yenecektir. O sürede, o süreyi bekleyene kadar fuayeyi sizi davet ediyorum.
Generally, when guest speakers give their lectures, there will be no question and answer session. So please take the chance, and if you have questions, during break you can ask your questions.
Great to be with you today, and I would like to discuss with you about Tawada Yoko's transcultural approach to European antiquity, focusing on one of her works, Opium for Obed, like in Japanese, Henshin no Tame no Opium, or in German, Opium für Ovid. Basically, so among the Japanese writers who have gained international recognitions in the last few decades, Tawada Yoko has become famous for a transcultural and translinguistic production, and she has established a literary career as a Japanese-German bilingual writer. And among other prizes, she has won also the Japan's Akutagawa's Prize. So she is quite famous both in Japan and abroad. And what's interesting, or what interests me most about her, is that most of her stories transpose the classical repertoire of ancient myths and fairy tales into a Kafkaesque, surreal dimensions. For example, just to mention a few examples, let's say storytellers without soul, like takes a part of Kakitori Monogatari and in the plot, or also like the prize-winning novel, The Bridegroom Was a Dog, Inomukoi, evokes Japanese folktales about shape-shifting dogs and foxes. And also there is another play called Orpheus Oda Izanagi, which means Orpheus or Izanagi, which brings together the Japanese god Izanagi and the mythological Greek musician Orpheus. So that's quite interesting because she puts all the two cultures together. And one of her most interesting adaptations of the classical repertoire is Opium für Ovid, ein Kopfkissenbuch von 22 Frauen, Opium for Ovid, a pillow book of 22 women, who has been written both in German and in Japanese as Henshin no Tame no Opium, Opium for Metamorphosis. Actually, it is a collection of loosely related episodes whose protagonists are 22 women named after mythological female figures described in Ovid's Metamorphoses. And they live and occasionally meet in modern Hamburg in Germany. And their stories evoke the stories narrated by Ovid, but at the same time they twist their plots. For example, we have Leto, Juno, Leda, Io. But, for example, let's say Leda turns herself into a swan instead of being seduced by Jupiter in the shape, in the form of a swan. Or Io is a woman who dreams of being, is an overweight woman who dreams of being a cow, and so on. So all these stories have references to the Greek mythology. And the Metamorphosis, Ovid's Metamorphosis as a work, actually appears in Tawada's text when Thetis, one of Tawada's characters, finds Ovid's Metamorphosis book in Io's house and reads it cover to cover. So there is an intertextual reference, but the text, like Ovid's poem, is physically present inside the word of the novel. And Opium for Ovid also evokes the Japanese Makura no Soshi, the pillow book, because its German subtitle includes the word Kopfkissenbuch, pillow book. And its fragmented narrative structure evokes the small chapters in which Sei Shonegon collects her observations. And apart from these intertexts, there are also other references. Maybe the most famous is to Thomas de Quincey's Confession of an English Opium Eater and to Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. Okay, so I will sit down because I'm tired standing. Yeah. And in another more globalized literary market, when Japanese writers are addressing more and more international audiences, Tawada rewrites the myths narrated by Ovid and contaminates them with elements from different literary traditions. So Tawada opens new interpretations to the Ovidian motif of metamorphosis, and she intertwines it with themes such as cultural translation, creative production, colonial domination, and the female body as a site of resistance. Well, in order to understand the function of the Ovidian metamorphosis in Tawada's retelling, it is important to notice that she has thought about metamorphosis in a series of lectures at Tübingen University, published under the title Verwandlungen, Metamorphosis. And in one of this lecture, which is entitled Gesicht eines Fisches oder das Problem der Verwandlung, Face of a Fish, or the problem of metamorphosis, Tawada explains that ever since antiquity, metamorphosis has been one of the most important motifs in literature. And she points out that Ovid's poem has been a model for many generations of writers who have approached the shape-shifting motif. Of course, among these writers, Tawada mentioned Kafka, whose idea of metamorphosis is strongly related to the concepts of identity loss and performance. And moving from Kafka's literary work, she explains that metamorphosis exposes the ambivalence of reality and the fictional nature of definitions, which draw artificial lines, artificial divides between things. And so in this regard, Tawada retells the Ovidian motif of metamorphosis as a passage from one identity to another, or in a broader sense, as a passage, as a transit from one culture to another culture. And Tawada's story of metamorphosis mirrors an age characterized by cultural, interspecial, hybrid spaces. So if we can draw a parallel, we could say that whereas Ovid, like places the entire repertoire of ancient mythology in the background of his work to make sense of his own work from the origin to the Augustan age, because he writes for all.
And also, many researchers have proved that these researches indicates in a varying degree that people's psychology explores the relation to social environment, culture, tradition, while different social environment and culture tradition will more or less influence the rise and the development
problems will go to the hospital. Okay, thank you again. Okay, it's a very, very interesting topic. Okay, all right. The advance of technology enables people to share their ideas about the other nations by photos, videos, articles, notes, and etc. And hypertext dictionaries are the cyberspace that allows thousands and sometimes millions of people to give information and to share their opinions, comments, and news. Well, now here we'll examine the image of South Korea. I noticed there is a beautiful young lady from South Korea. So when you make your speech, be careful. She's in front of me. Okay. So, this from the, I think, from Erciyes Üniversitesi, we'll examine the image of South Korea according to the descriptions in 4 popular hypertext dictionaries in Turkey. One is Eski Sözlük, İnci Sözlük, Uludağ Sözlük, and İtu Sözlük. The 4 very important dictionaries. Well, we may be very, very curious about the entry of Korean girls, okay, who can be very shy, but they can wear miniskirts. Is it funny? Is it interesting? Okay. Which is a good example to see now or how image creating process develops in terms of the cultural differences. Now let's welcome Zaliha Nilüfer Nahia. Okay, from the Department of Turkish Folklore of Erciyes Üniversitesi of Turkey. Welcome.
I'll try to do my best, but before I start, I want to offer my deepest condolences for the people who died in the recent ferry disaster in South Korea. Yeah, our subject is image. Image is one of the most important concepts of our time. Not only the famous people, but also politicians, companies, and even states care about their image. On the other hand, people imagine themselves and others both at the personal and the national level. Nations reproduce many cultural arguments, stereotypes, stigmatizations, political explanations about the others. But the concept of image involves full meanings of pictures, statues, optical illusions, maps, diagrams, dreams, hallucinations, spectacles, projections, poems, patterns, memories, and ideas, as Michel mentioned. And today's technology gives also the opportunity to us not only to identify ourselves, but also to share our ideas about the other nations by photos, videos, articles, notes, and etc. Computer technology and internet enabled a computer-mediated communication in between people and also created cyberspaces. Hypertext web dictionaries are the cyberspaces that allow millions of people to share their opinions, comments, news, and protests as well. This interactive relationship leads for imaginative texts which recreate images of the others within the scope. Thus, in this paper, I will examine the image of South Korea according to the descriptions in 4 popular hypertext dictionaries. I use the approach of social anthropology for analyzing the image in this study. The first dictionary is Erciyes Üniversitesi, which is the first interactive hypertext web dictionary. There are some other similar dictionaries considered as clones. The oldest of these clones is Uludağ Sözlük. Other dictionary is İTÜ Sözlük, and it's created first for Istanbul Technical University students, later opened for the public. And the last dictionary is İnci Sözlük, which has a specific position in the use of insulting. Although slang and insulting is common in these dictionaries, in all 4 dictionaries, writers sometimes refer humor only to emphasize their opinions within the web dictionaries. These web dictionaries contain descriptions about terms, places, people, events, along with gossips, misinformation, personal opinions, and heavy criticism. Moreover, members of each dictionary chat with each other, answer their comments, organize face-to-face meetings called as zirve, summit, use unusual nicknames, as you see here, some examples, which make the writers unknown at the same time. So, they are not very different from the real societies with their self-identifications, otherings, and etc. In order to get the information about the image of South Korea in these dictionaries, I choose the major and popular titles and examined them. I read the information, opinions, comparisons, critics in the entries. There was useful information about South Korea and Korean life involving impressions about Korea. But in contradiction to classical image studies, these dictionaries are interactive, collaborative hypertexts with multiple writers in one website. But still, writers and dictionaries become image actors, recreating an image of South Korea by using information. So now I will start to give my subtitles. Actually, I want to give more information about the entries. Entries were written according to the information, observations, and experiences of writers who visited South Korea or living in there. And also, the information given in the films, TV series, books, and internet were used for the entries. I saw that South Korea is the major and the longest title of all the dictionaries. When all the titles examined, it's possible to see the main topics about South Korea. And these are the main topics about South Korea, if we put all the titles together. And when I read the details, I can say that these topics include descriptions, not only geographic, but also imaginative. In my article in the book, I didn't put the comments of the writers, but for the presentation, I chose some of them. It was very hard to translate them in Turkish, but I just tried, I can say this. And, okay, let's continue. Above all, South Korea is described as a Far East country. Writers do not only describe Korea and Korean life, but also compare this information with Turkish life and interpret Korean culture into Turkish daily life by creating some connection points. For example, visa. Visa is one of the main problems of Turkish citizens, especially in visiting European countries. And it's mentioned many times in the entries that South Korea government do not obtain visa on arrival in Korea. Another title will be about physical appearance.
Şairliğini, özellikle kültürel anlamların yeniden nasıl kurgulandığını anlatmaya çalışmak istiyorum. Öncelikle kavramlardan başlayalım çünkü kulağımıza da fonetik açıdan bir yabancı gelen kavramlar var. İnşaattan başlayalım. Toplumsal cinsiyetle kimlik çalışmalarında anahtar kavramlardan bir tanesi inşa ve şu anlama geliyor. Beden ve kimliğin devlet tarafından üzerine kültürel anlamların inşa edileceği, yazılacağı, kurgulanacağı boş bir alan olarak kabul edilmesi anlamına geliyor. Peki toplumsal cinsiyet nedir? Aslında akademide yaygınlık kazanmış bir kavram ama hala zaman zaman kafa karışıklığı yarattığını görüyoruz. Toplumsal cinsiyet terimi, toplum ve kültür tarafından inşa edildiği kabul edilen cinsiyet rollerini tanımlamak, toplumsal cinsiyetin biyolojik cinsiyetten farkını vurgulamak üzere gender sözcüğünün karşılığı olarak Türkçe türetilmiş ve akademide yaygınlık kazanmıştır. Biz Rusya'da toplumsal cinsiyet algısını özellikle 20. yüzyılın ilk çeyreğinde edebi metinler üzerinden takip etmeye çalışıyoruz. Bunun sebebi şu, 20. yüzyıl başlarında henüz kuramlaştırılamamış, teorik anlamda geliştirilememiş toplumsal cinsiyet algısının dönüşümleridir. Gözlemlenebileceği yazılı kaynakların en önemlileri söz konusu algıyı alt metninde taşıyan edebi eserlerdir. Edebi eserin kendi döneminin taşıyıcısı olmanın yanında dönemi şekillendirici, ona yön verici niteliği, toplumsal yaşama dair bilgi edinmede alternatif bir kılavuz kabul edilmesini anlaşılır kılmaktadır. Biz toplumsal cinsiyet çalışmaları dediğimiz zaman aslında bir alt başlık olarak kadın çalışmalarını da ele alıyoruz. Bunun nedeni tarihe ve daha özelde edebiyat tarihine pozitif ayrımcılıkla yaklaşılması ve yüzyıllar boyunca geri planda kalan kadını
bakan gururlu ve umursamaz bir ifade vardır. Nikahtaki kalabalığın genç kızın ve yaşlı adamın yakınlarından oluşması resimde bir çatışmaya yol açmıştır. Yaşlı adamın yakınları damat ile aynı yüz ifadesini takınmışlar, genç kızın yakınlarının yüzlerinde ise burukluk hissedilmektedir. Fakat davetliler arasında bir figür dikkati çeker. O da şoför karakteridir. Bu karakter gelinin hemen arkasında yer alır, kollarını birbirine bağlamış eleştirel gözlerle yaşlı damada bakmaktadır. İlginç olan nokta bu karakterin ressamın ta kendisi olmasıdır. Bu hikaye aslında ressamın kendi yaşamından alıntıdır ve ressam kadınların kaderinin toplum ihtiraslarının kurbanlanmaması gerektiğini bu trajik resimde büyük bir kitleye ulaştırmış olur. Büyük bir ilgiyle karşılanan resim olumsuz eleştirilere de maruz kalmıştır. Bazılarına göre gelinin ağlaması anlamsızdır çünkü genç kız fakirlikten kurtulduğu için mutlu olmalıdır. Tema ile ilgili diğer bir resim, Rus ressam Korneyev'in 1866 yılında yaptığı Eşitsiz Evlilik adlı yapıtıdır. Bu yapıtta genç gelin ve yaşlı damadın nikahtan sonra liseden çıkışı ve kalabalığın onları karşılaması görülmektedir. Resimde durağanlık yerine devinim hakimdir. Resim çok figürlüdür. Soyluların yanı sıra dilenciler, üstü başı yırtık ama neşeyle dans eden çocuklar, yani halktan insanlar da bulunmaktadır.
Heard some voices, loud voices, and then he says General Rappa's round-shaped troop is coming. They have unexpectedly loud voices compared to their bodies because their bodies are really small. But General Tabora doesn't care and goes back to sleep. And then General Rappa, he got angry and say, "How insolent, I'm done with your uncivil attitude." Finally, Rappa claims that Charumera is originally his brother and destroys the barbarous Dabora together with the big Charumera. So Charumera is weak and with the Dabora troop at the beginning because he can Rappa and his troop, of course, saved the Charumera. Rappa completed his duty to punish the uncivil Dahora, to protect Charumera by means of a righteous war. There is another story, but I think we don't have so much time. It was also just like the others. There are three parts: China, Japan, and Chosen. Sino-Japanese War was described as a righteous war aimed at rescuing the weak in these fables. Also, these fables created the consciousness of being a nation by introducing the war as bringing civilization and eliminates savage from the east. Also, at the beginning, I told you, Sino-Japanese War was it was, say, civilization, a war civilization between we and other, between civilization and barbarism. Shonen Sekai also distinguished between we and other. In this way, the magazine discriminated barbarian to create a consciousness of we as a civilized and unified nation. During the war, Shonen Sekai contributed to create the national identity just as expected by the Meiji government. But after the war, Shonen Sekai discriminated the readers on the basis of their sex to make them aware of their gender identity. Just like we're going to talk about that. It's also the same process in Japan, by the way. In other words, Shonen Sekai educated the girls to be someone's mother, wife, daughter in future, and prepared the boys as men who would serve to the country in the field of the military, politics, or science. Thank you.
Comments or questions? Please feel free.
I have a comment actually thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting and I didn't know about this in particular, but that's interesting to see how they represented all these war dynamics for children. And also another interesting part of what you said is that in that period, usually there were Western countries were still looking at the Asian countries like uncivilized, and then Japan tries to shake off this uncivilized image and imposes it on other Asian countries.
I have a comment and thanks. In which kind? Right now I'm preparing other research for some other conference with the subject. The subject is authentical poetry texts usage in foreign language lesson. So how it influences the formatting of intercultural competence. But anyway, the usage of authentical poetical text in language learning lesson. So right now you gave us such a live example of how this poetry text, which I didn't understand as a word, but which I think I understood as a whole, as an emotion. So I think that I know that your speaking, your reading influenced also my future researches, and I thank you for this. Thank you so much. Factors in the poetry language which help us to learn maybe not the words but the feeling of the language.
Yeah, we can feel something from his reading of the poem.
Especially if we have such readers, such intonation, such thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any more questions? Okay, So, where exactly? Zamanında. Okay. Thank you so much for your attention and for your coming. Okay. Thank you.
It is too difficult to understand all because I'm so sorry I couldn't study enough papers because of organization issues. By the way, I really appreciated from your presentation paper when I have read. It is dealing with lots of details. For example, 1001 1001 and some Arabic sources mention about something which means comparative focus on study, and I think it mentioned both Western literature and Eastern literature, and in the paper you can see what the Oriental literature, Oriental influence to the Kazakh literature. So I strongly recommend you to listen Assistant Professor Jana Abdigab Barova. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm sorry, I just talked about generally. There will be 20 minutes for each presenter, then 10 minutes question and answer. This clock is not working. By the way,
dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm glad to see you here. I'm from Kazakhstan. My paper is the National Poetic Genre in Kazakh literature. Classical Oriental literature has an influential impact on Kazakh literature. By the influence of Oriental literature, the literary tradition Nazira was born in literature. In Arabic language, Nazira regularly is used in the meaning of resemblance, whereas and Farsi it sounds katabu. It's the tradition established in Oriental literature in Middle Ages. This tradition was created due to the reply of the poet to the classical works written before him. Nazira tradition is a literary device which was not interrupted during the years and has been deeply developed. By the use of Nazira, the work is based on the familiar word which has been repeated several times. The poet takes part in contests wherein competes with the poets who wrote about this or that aspect previously. The common plot in Oriental literature is expected by tells in Quran stories about saints and apostles, the Arabian Nights, Shahnama, and others. The following scholar
that refused to be rooted in national soil. So, and they could also create rigid boundaries that demand the expression of personal experiences and thoughts and sentiments within a certain context, within a certain setting, with a predefined language choice. These national adjectives have the power of doing that, restraining creativity, making sure that they are expressed in certain predefined ways. So the objective is how to identify how these definitions and rules formulate the space and hierarchies within the broad continuum of Sri Lankan poetry, and method in order to identify the characteristics of Sri Lankan poetry. I have looked at the definitions given by scholars as well as some poems which are considered, which are well known as Sri Lankan, to see whether what the scholars and critics say is compatible with the actual poetic creation. And also, I have looked at a number of other poems to assess the consistency of these characteristics. And I have looked at 3 or more poets in Sri Lanka to see how hierarchy is formulated among them. And talking about theoretical debates and boundaries, literature on Sri Lankan poetry is instrumental in clearly identifying its boundaries. Now, D.C.R. Gunadilaka is one of the well-known critics in Sri Lanka who comments on Sri Lankan literature in English. Now, as you can see here, he says, Sri Lanka's English writers have reached a degree of achievement which compares favorably in quality with good poetry in English. Now, what is interesting about this quotation is, Sri Lanka's English writers
büyük bir çoğunluğu edebi çevreye ilgi duymaktadır. İlgi duymadıklarını söyleyen öğrencilerin bölümlerindeki edebiyat dersinden dolayı edebi çeviri dersine karşı ön yargılı davrandıkları gözlemlenmiştir. Öğrenciler Fransızca öğretiminde edebi çeviriye yer verilmesinin amacının dilin kullanımı ile ilgili çeşitli örnekleri sunmak ve Fransızca ana kaynağından öğrenmek olduğunu düşünmektedir. Öğrenciler edebi çeviri dersinde öğretmen-öğrenci odaklı bir program istemektedirler. Öğrencilerin büyük bir çoğunluğu edebi çeviri dersinin okuma, yazma ve konuşma gibi dil becerilerinin gelişmesine katkıda bulunacağını düşünmektedir. Öğrenciler Fransızca öğretiminde edebi eser çevirilerine yer veren bir programın dil öğrenmeye ilgiyi arttıracağını düşünmektedir. Öğrencilere vermiş olduğu cevaplar doğrultusunda bölümde edebi çeviri dersine yer verilmesinin olumlu sonuçlar doğuracağını söyleyebiliriz. Bu da gösteriyor ki yabancı dil öğretiminde edebi çevirinin kullanımı öğrenenler açısından sıkıcı olmaktan ziyade dil becerilerinin gelişimi için
love for a certain foreign author, you largely speak about the level of skill of the translator. Naturally, we appreciate any translation by its quality due to very perfect work of translator. To manage to make the text interesting, readable, to save its style, to convey the idea of the author is a talent, and this talent of the translator who undertook this tremendous work suggests that this translator has to learn and to develop the theory and practice of literary translation through all his life. However, ignorance of sufficient knowledge of original language often creates for a translator some serious problems. To avoid this problem, the fiction translator should follow some specific rules. So first of all, as it was mentioned above, the complete absence of literal translation. It means it is entirely impossible to translate words by words any fiction text. Then secondly, translation of the sustainable expressions, aphorism, phraseology, idioms, etc. To cope with this problem of translation of aphorism, proverbs, sayings, idioms into another language, the translator should have a rich vocabulary and to have full specialized teaching. For example, Russian idioms "дождь льет как из ведра", rains as from the bucket, if to translate word by word. Russian idioms, and голодный как волк, hungry as a wolf. In English, sound completely different. It rains cats and dogs. Can you imagine how the Russian will translate, how to translate these idioms into Russian? And for example, if we say in Russian that we are angry as a wolf, the English people, they would say hungry as a hunter, just vice versa. It means that the translator from and the brilliance of the translation in whole depends on the talent of the interpreter, his resourcefulness. What the translator used just to do it in such cases. Some of them just omitted and do not pay attention to identify the game of words. Others may try to compensate it with, and replace it with some other words. Others simply put in their own marks game of words. Naturally, in all three cases, the quality of literary translation is lower, as usual marks are not as interesting to the reader as an equivalent translation. Here it is a wonderful example of a mastership of translation of such episode. Describe the case at the funeral. The person are coming for the funeral and he is asking, am I late? Not you, sir. She is late. This is in English. If to translate it word by word into Russian, it will sound, for example, like this. Was I late? No, sir. The disease is not you, but she. And here is how the translator comes out of this difficult situation. Is it all over? The person who came late, he is asking, no, sir, not for you. Yeah? So, this is how the translator found a very perfect expression for this humorous situation. Not very humorous because of the funeral. Yeah. So, he said, no, sir, not for you, but for her. The level of skill of the translator of literary text is determined by their ability with dignity to come out of this situation. Now imagine another situation. The English-speaking student who is studying Russian language find in the English dictionary the word late. And a Russian translation, late, it means to be late, and lay a dead body. Yeah? The corpse, dead body. So, the student comes for the class, and in the morning when he is late, he knocks the door, opens the door, and says in Russian, sorry sir, I am dead, may I come in? The experience of teaching Russian language...
karakterler üzerine yoğunlaşılmış olduğu dikkatimizi çekti. Bir tarafta Kazak yazarı eserleri, karakter incelemesi, analizi yapılırken diğer taraftan bir edebi figür bütün bir edebiyat içerisinde ele alınışı söz konusu. O yüzden hani edebiyattan ziyade kahramanlar desek yanlış olmaz herhalde bu oturumun kendisi için. İlk önce ilk olarak gelmek üzere Bayer'la gayet dinleyeceğiz. Kendisinin konusu The Relations Between Character and Circumstance in Kazak yazılışı. Kendisi bir Kazak yazarı Sokak Bayer'in eserlerinde tarihselcilik anlayışıyla bir karakter analizi yapmış. Dinliyoruz kendini.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Erciyes. I am from Kazakhstan. The title of my paper, The Relations Between Character and Circumstance Kazakh Literature. The relation between literary characters and literary setting is complicated in Kazakh literature. This relation is important in analyzing and comprehending the literary movement, the authors and their compositions. Identifying the interrelations, labels and types of interrelations and interactions of these two literary elements is one of the important issues of modern literary studies. In home literary literature studies, scholars such as Rumaliyev, Kirabayev, Fadulin, Nurgaliyev, and X have also written arguments on this issue in their research works. Three types of searching in Kazakh prose can be identified. One, a defining searching aimed in manifesting the soul, power, will, and spiritual capacity of the character. Two, a molding searching which is in fact develops and recreates the character. It has an actual construction features. Three, an evaluating searching which enhance the character's activist ability. In many 20th century rights works, we can often find obstacles before the characters and they strive to gain their goals at all costs. One interesting fact is that these characters themselves actively involved in the emergence of both new times and searching. This type of relation between searching and character. The story, the project is a work on sports where at first the main character Murat was presented as a melancholic and weak young, while the readers show mercy one. However, gradually his personality was trained to become thousand and rejoices the readers by the gravelness, hard work, attentionless, and patriotism.
Here, inside books, not far from classic question, but inside books. And Amele kind one variety of transmeaning translation, and there are 5,300 speakers, and everybody is bilingual with Tokpisi, and Tokpisi is English-based Creole language, and it's one of the official languages in Pakistan. Official language is primarily English, Tokpisi, and Hindi. And for example, Tokpisi is English-based and similar to English. For example, there is no one words in Tokpisi. We can say "Nongkiram inogatma," and a little bit similar to English. And neighbor languages, and there are two kinds. And one is Austronesian languages. Austronesian languages are the people originated from Taiwan or somewhere near Taiwan, and they went from Taiwan by canoe. They arrived in the Philippines and Indonesia, Malaysia, and some brave people went to New Zealand or East Island too. And it's approximately 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. The languages are Bell and Kakila, and it's there. And these red dots are usually Austronesian languages, and it's spoken near coastline or some islands. Another one is Trans-New languages, and Trans-New languages are similar to the languages of Aboriginal people in Australia. They came to New Zealand and Australia about 30,000 or 50,000 years ago. And it's older than Austronesian people. And Amele is one of Trans-New languages, very old of it, and also non-normal and Syriac also Trans-New languages.
Where did they come from? Where did they come from?
Originally from Africa, and then maybe Turkey, China. And some people went to Alaska and then North America and South America. It's 20,000. No, 12,000. Oh no, 10,000 to.
is of moonlight and rain, which is mentioned more than once throughout the novel. As for the setting, the opening story of the collection, Shiramye, White Peak, imposes itself as the decisive factor. This novel describes the encounter between the poet Saiyo and the ghost of the emperor Stoker, which took place in the Kagawa prefecture, in the same places where the interaction between Kafka and the old man Nakata takes place. After comparing the two texts, we observe that in their respective plots, the main characters are all heading towards Takamatsu, and their paths are characterized by different experiences with the supernatural. It must also be underlined that both Akinari and Murakami transform an incipit characterized by the presence of Kari into the ideal instrument that can work as opening for the following developments of the plot, animated by a climax charged with supernatural elements. Along the same lines, we can also mention another similarity between the novel and the tales of Moonlight and Rain. In this case, the art of surreality are strongly connected, and the meanings between human beings and supernatural creatures develop in a context of acceptance of the other that naturally evolves. The cord that connects Kafka on the Shore and the tales of Moonlight and Rain gets thicker and thicker as the plot unfolds. Once in Takamatsu, the young Kafka temporarily settles in the library Komura, managed by Mrs. Saeki and Oshima, the librarian with the chimeric appearance, who urges the boy to think about literary and existentialist issues such as love and loneliness. In such setting, the short novel The Chrysanthemum Vow, the second work in Akinari's collection, is mentioned by the librarian while speaking to Kafka. In the novel, Akana Soemon, a moral-called samurai, is welcomed to the house of Hasebe Samo and his mother, so as to gather strength and be forced to hit the road again. The triangle formed by the two samurai and the woman seems to influence the relationships established by the characters of Murakami's novel. It is surprising, in fact, to observe how similarly the young adolescent and the samurai Akana begin their adventures. They are both wandering men who are offered hospitality into someone's home, in which the mother's figure, in Kafka's case it is Mrs. Saeki, is sided by a brother figure, in this case represented by Oshima. In a nutshell, as we have summed up earlier, it seems that a certain similarity persists in the connection created by the characters in their respective plots. The bond that connects the female side characters to the two main characters is a mother-son type of relationship. Despite not being clearly explained, many elements in Murakami's story induce the reader to draw the conclusion that Saeki is in reality the young Kafka biological mother. Likewise, the relationship established between the two couples of men, at first seen as friendship. However, as the plot unfolds, this bond undergoes a profound change and is transformed into a brotherhood pact, even accompanied by a formal explanation. Here, the two men found perfect agreement. Admiring each other and happy to be together, they swore vows of brotherhood. "I lost my father and mother long ago," he said, "but now your aged mother is my own." If we compare what we have just related to its equivalent in Murakami's novel, we will find a certain similarity. In fact, I quote, "We have decided to take you in. From now, you will be a part of the library. It's all based on a very simple principle. I understand you, and Mrs. Saeki understands me. I accept you, and she accepts me." Moreover, it is possible to extend the same logic to the relationship Saeki-Oshima and Samo's mother, Akana Soemon. The brotherhood pact between the two samurai is also extended to Samo's mother, who in this case goes from being biological mother to psychological mother. As for the literary palimpsest, the Confucian matrix which defines the relationship among the three individuals is one of the elements that links Akinari's work to the clearly Neo-Confucian cultural background at the time of the publication of Tales of Moonlight and Rain. A sort of range of virtues that goes from loyalty to filial piety, passing through moral values that are close to the samurai's moral code. As far as Murakami is concerned, instead, it proves more difficult to be able to find an explanation for such a choice. In other words, to suggest a mini-plot which may revisit a novel inspired by Confucian view of relationships. However, reading the author's confessions in Rahat in August, we perceive that there is a deep intellectual and emotional connection to the works, and to the authors mentioned in the interview, thus supporting the interpretation which validates the structural contamination of the author's contemporary works by some readings he enjoyed as a teenager. As for the third of the three works mentioned in Rahat in August, The Tale of the Heike, its influence on Murakami's poetic style is more evident in his later work, Haiku Étions. Here we find direct quotations taken from the Gunki Monogatari, which seems to represent an important pillar to the novel, both for what concerns the quantity of the narrative material and coherence with the general context. The Tale of the Heike is introduced by the character Kaeri, the teenager who is fleeing from Sakigake, a community in the Yamanashi countryside, under the leadership of a mysterious spiritual chief, the antagonist in the novel, a man whose past is stained with blood and who has mystical powers. In this case, as in the case of previously analyzed works, we are faced with a reference made by direct quotation, with the exact aim of drawing the reader's attention on the